Hello, welcome back to Algebra 1. We're going to continue learning how to solve these simple single-step equations with addition and subtraction. These equations are just going to require a little more thinking, nothing too hard, but as you see, it will all become simple as you gain experience. So if we have the equation negative x plus 6 is equal to 4. All right, you want to get x by itself. Now I realize that the x here has a negative sign in front of it, but for now just ignore that. You're kind of look at these things as a puzzle to solve. What do I need to do first? What do I need to do second? The plus 6 here is the biggest problem. We need to get rid of him. So since it's addition, we need to do the opposite, which is subtraction. So we're going to subtract 6 from both sides. So we have the plus 6, we'll subtract 6 from the left, and then when we do that, we have to subtract 6 from the right. Now when we do that, this goes to 0, so on the left we still have negative x equals, and on the right hand side we have 4 minus 6. So now you know from doing this so many times, anytime you have subtraction, you take the bigger number 6 minus 4, which is going to give you 2, but the sign of the answer goes with the larger absolute value. So here you have a positive 4, you have a negative 6 here, so the larger absolute value is negative, so it's going to be a negative 2. So here is where a lot of students get confused at this point. They don't know what to do next because you're trying to get x by itself, but here you don't quite have x by itself. You have negative x. So that's not really quite the answer. You want to have just x all by himself, just like we've been doing in all of the previous problems. So you need to think about, how can I get x by himself? And it's not quite obvious what to do in the beginning, but let me just show you. Remember, you can add or subtract anything you want to this equation, as long as you do it to the left and to the right. So far we've been adding and subtracting numbers, but we can actually move this guy, if you want to think of it this way, we can move it to the other side of the equal sign by adding x to both sides of the equation. Let me just show you how that would work out. Let me change colors real quick. So we have the negative x on the left equals negative 2 on the right. We can do anything we want to both sides, so we can actually add x to the left and add x to the right. So in all of the previous problems we've been adding numbers, but you can add variables also. Now what does that do? Well, on the left-hand side, what is negative x plus x equal? Well, negative something plus the same thing that's positive is always going to give you 0. On the right, you'll have negative 2 plus x. Now you see what we've done? We now have positive x all by himself, which is what we want, or at least we've gotten rid of the negative sign. We need to get rid of the negative 2. How do we do that? The opposite of this negative sign is going to be addition, so we'll add 2 to both sides. 0 plus 2 on the left, negative 2 plus x. I just insert the addition of this adding 2 to the right and add 2 to the left. So what we have on the left is 2 is equal to x, because the negative 2 and the positive 2 on the right-hand side, those add to 0. And of course, you can rearrange that and say x is equal to 2. That's the final answer. And convince yourself of that, stick x in here. What this is saying is if you put the number 2 into this spot, it becomes negative 2 plus 6. I think you can convince yourself that will actually equal 4. So when you have a negative x all by himself, there'll be different ways to handle it as we get more experience with different kinds of equations. I'll show you other ways to handle it later. But for now, just using addition and subtraction, move him to the other side. Make him positive by adding x to both sides. All right, so let's get a little more practice with another one. What if we had 8 is equal to negative x plus 18? Same problem. We have negative x here, which isn't quite what we want. So we have to do first things first. Let's get rid of the 18. This is a positive 18. How do we get rid of it? Opposite of addition is subtraction. So it'll be 8 minus 18 on the left, because we'll be subtracting 18 from both sides of the equation. So we'll subtract 18 from the left, and we'll also, to make it balanced, we'll subtract 18 from the right. Now this goes to 0. So on the left, what is 18 minus 8? When you do subtraction, you have 8 minus 18. To handle it, you just take the bigger number minus the smaller number. 18 minus 8 gives you 10, but the sign of it is going to go with the larger absolute value, which is this guy, making it negative 10. On the right-hand side, the 18 minus 18 gives you 0, so you just have negative x. So here you're very close to the answer, but you want to get x by himself as a positive x. So the way to get rid of this and effectively move him to the other side and make him positive is we're going to add x to both sides. Negative 10 plus x is equal to negative x plus x. All right, so on the left-hand side you have negative 10 plus x, And on the right-hand side, you have 0. Now look what we have. We have x all by him. Well, it's not by himself yet, but at least he's positive. Now we need to get rid of the negative 10. How do you do that? You add 10 to both sides. So negative 10 plus x plus 10 is equal to 0 plus 10. We just add 10 to both sides. On the left, the negative 10 adds with this to give me 0, so all I have on the left is x, and all I have on the right is 10, and the answer is x is equal to 10. And you can check that. You can take 10 and stick it all the way back up in here, which will make it negative 10, since you have the negative here. Negative 10 plus 18, if you do the subtraction there, you'll find out that you're going to get a positive 8, which is the right answer. All right? So the lesson here is anytime you see negative x all by himself, you can make him positive by basically adding the opposite to bring him basically to the other side is what's going to happen there. So now we have r plus 4 plus 2 is equal to 1. R plus 4 plus 2 is equal to 1. Now don't let these parentheses confuse you. We always try to do what's inside the parentheses first, but there's really nothing to do here. R plus 4, I really can't add them. There's lots of ways you can handle this, to be honest with you. I'm just going to show you one way. Let's take and first get rid of the 2 and bring it over there. So in order to do that, we have to subtract 2. So r plus 4, you can leave it wrapped up in this parentheses here, plus 2 minus 2 is equal to 1 minus 2. All we did was subtract 2 from both sides. That means that this is going to give you 0. So on the left, you have r plus 4 is equal to, what is 1 minus 2? I think you'd all agree that that's going to give you negative 1. We've done enough of the subtraction that you can see that that's going to give you negative 1. Now, to get r by himself, we'll just subtract the 4. We dropped the parentheses here. I could leave the parentheses here, but really there's no reason to, because it's the only thing on this side, and you can't do anything inside with it, so you can kind of just drop them. So now we'll subtract 4. R plus 4, we'll subtract 4 from the left. Negative 1 minus 4, we'll subtract 4 from the right. So on the left, the 4's go away. You'll have r equals, what is negative 1 minus 4? When you're subtracting two things that are negative, or when you have a negative number subtracting something, you're going more deeply negative. So basically, you're going to add them together, which will be 5, and the answer is going to be negative 5. And you can think of this as negative 1 minus 4, or you can also think of it as negative 1 plus a negative 4. So you're kind of adding two negative numbers together, which always gives you a negative answer. So the answer there is going to be negative 5. If you stick that in there, negative 5 plus 4 is going to give you negative 1 in here, and negative 1 plus positive 2 is going to give you a positive 1. So that actually does give you the right answer. All right, let's change colors here a little bit and see if we can solve another equation. What if we had 4 minus 1 minus x, I'm sorry, let's make it 1 plus x, is equal to 5. So again, you got to think of it as almost like unwrapping a Christmas present. You have the x in here, that's what you want to get to, but you can't go straight to it. You have to kind of unwrap the outside first. So outside of the set of parentheses, you have a number 4. This is a positive 4. Don't let the negative confuse you here. This is a positive 4. So let's get rid of him by subtracting 4 from both sides. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we'll have 4, we'll subtract 4 from the left. Let's rewrite the problem, 1 plus x is equal to, and we'll subtract the 4 from the right. Now on the left, the 4 minus 4 gives us 0. So all I have left on the left is negative, parentheses, 1 plus x. And on the right, 5 minus 4 is just simply 1. So now you have to think about, what do I need to do next? Now you want to get this x and get them all by himself, but you have the parentheses here and you have a negative sign out here. Remember that distributive property. This is like a negative 1. So you want to distribute it and multiply it in here and also multiply it in here to get rid of those parentheses. So when you multiply the negative sign times the 1, you're just going to get negative 1. And when you multiply the negative sign here times the x, you're just going to get negative x. So it'll be negative 1 minus x is equal to 1. So now you've gotten rid of the parentheses and you're one step closer. You want to get this isolated, so let's get rid of the negative 1 first. You have a negative 1. How do you get rid of that? Well, you have to add 1 to both sides. So let's go over here and continue the problem. We'll have negative 1. We're going to add 1 to both sides is equal to 1 plus 1. All I've done here is I've inserted the addition of 1 to both sides. The reason is so I can get rid of this. So that's going to go to 0. I will have negative x is equal to 1 plus 1, which is 2. All right, now you have to ask yourself, using addition and subtraction, which is all we're doing, how do we get the negative x and make him positive? We essentially are going to move him to the other side. We're going to add x to both sides. We're going to do the opposite. So it would be negative x plus x is equal to 2 plus x. So on the left you'll have 0, and on the right you'll have 2 plus x. Now, how do you get x by himself? You have a positive 2 here. You have to do the opposite, which means subtract 2. So 0 minus 2 on the left, 2 minus 2 plus x. All I've done is I've subtracted 2 here from both sides and here, which makes this quantity go to 0. And so continuing on here, what you'll have is negative 2 on the left is equal to x on the right, or x is equal to negative 2. And that's the final answer. X is equal to negative 2. And if you take this guy and stick it all the way back in the original equation, what do you have? Negative 2 here plus 1 is going to give you negative 1 here. Negative 1. 4 minus a negative 1. Remember, minus a negative changes into a positive, so 4 plus 1 would then give you 5, and that's correct. So that's that final answer. Now let's shift the page up just a little bit and solve our last problem. And we're just getting a little bit of practice with this. We'll just do our last problem here at the bottom. What if we have 1 is equal to negative 2 minus 4 minus the variable w? Same thing. We want to get to the w, but we can't. We have to unwrap the present from bigger going inside smaller and smaller. So let's get rid of the negative 2 here. The negative 2, we need to get rid of it by adding 2. So 1 plus 2 to the left is equal to, and we'll have negative 2 plus 2 minus 4 minus w on the right. So essentially this goes to 0, and on the left you're going to have 3, and on the right you're going to have negative 4 minus w. Now it's the same thing. You have the negative sign out here. It needs to be distributed here and then here. So negative times 4, negative 1 times 4 is going to give you negative 4. And then when you distribute this negative 1 times negative w, negative times negative, remember, always gives you positive. So you'll have a positive w. That comes from the rules of multiplication. Negative times negative always gives you positive. And now we're almost there. We have a negative 4 there we need to get rid of, which we'll do by adding 4. So we'll add 4 to the left, and we'll add 4 to the right. So on the right, this goes to 0, this goes to 7. So you have 7 is equal to w, or w is equal to 7, however you want to write it. It's the same thing. W is equal to 7. And again, you can take this, and I'll leave it as an exercise to you to stick it in there. 4 minus 7 is going to give you negative 3 in here. And when you have a minus negative 3, it's like a plus 3. So what you end up having is negative 2 plus 3, which is going to give you positive 1, which is the final answer. And so for all of these problems, you really should always check your work because it's so easy to do. Now, we spent a lot of time with learning how to solve these simple equations, because solving equations is really the bread and butter of algebra. So make sure that you can do these problems, and then follow me on to the next lesson. We will cover another skill in our journey to learn algebra.